The man standing on the other side of the glass wall didn't look like the man I married. He didn't look like the man who had promised to love me until death did us part, and he certainly didn't look like the arrogant, confident executive who had walked out of our front door 3 years ago with 2 suitcases and a smirk. My assistant, Clara, pressed the intercom button on her desk. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Ms. Davis? There is Mr. Mark asking to see you. He says he doesn't have an appointment, but it's urgent. He says he knows you." I spun my chair around slowly, facing the floor-to-ceiling window of my office. From here, I could see the city skyline, gray and rainy. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. My manicure was perfect, a deep, confident red. 3 years ago, my hands used to shake. 3 years ago, my nails were bitten down to the quick because of nerves. I looked through the glass partition again. Mark was wearing a suit, but it wasn't one of the Italian silk ones I used to pick out for him. It was ill-fitting, slightly wrinkled at the shoulders. His hair, once dyed a rich chestnut to hide the gray, was now salt and pepper and thinning. He was holding a wet umbrella that was dripping onto the pristine carpet of my reception area. He looked tired. He looked old. And he looked desperate. I took a deep breath, smelling the scent of the fresh lilies in the vase on my desk. "Let him wait, Clara," I said calmly. "I have a few emails to finish." I watched as Clara relayed the message. I saw Mark's shoulders slump. He sat down on the edge of the waiting room chair, twisting his hands together. It was a nervous habit I recognized. He used to do that when he was lying. As I watched him, the silence of my office faded, and my mind drifted back. Not to this moment of victory, but to the moment my life fell apart. To the moment I realized that being a good wife, a loyal mother, and a supportive partner wasn't enough to keep a man who wanted to be young again. If you had looked at our life from the outside 5 years ago, you would have said we were the picture of the American dream. Mark was the vice president of a marketing firm. I was the woman who made his life possible. We had been married for 22 years. We had a beautiful 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with a perfectly manicured lawn. Our daughter, Sophie, was away at her 2nd year of university. My days were a rhythm of service. That's the only way to describe it. I woke up at 6 a.m. to make Mark's coffee, black, 2 sugars, exactly how he liked it. I ironed his shirts because he said the dry cleaners never got the collar crisp enough. I managed the bills, the grocery shopping, the repairs, the social calendar. I made sure that when Mark came home, the house was quiet, dinner was ready, and he didn't have to lift a finger. "You spoil him, Sarah," my sister used to tell me. "He doesn't even know how to load the dishwasher. He works hard," I would defend him. "He has a lot of stress. My job is to make sure he has peace at home." And I believed it. I really did. I thought that was the deal we made. He earned the money, I built the home. I had given up my own career in interior design when Sophie was born, and I never looked back. Mark's success was my success. But looking back now, I can see the cracks. I can see the things I chose to ignore. It started subtly, the way these things always do. The classic cliches of a midlife crisis that you read about in magazines but never think will happen to you. Mark turned 48, and suddenly, nothing was good enough. He started complaining about his car. "It's an old man's car, Sarah. I need something with a bit more power. Something that says I've arrived." So, he bought a red sports car that cost more than my first apartment. Then, it was the gym. He became obsessed with his weight. He started buying protein shakes and spending 2 hours every evening lifting weights, leaving me to eat dinner alone at the kitchen table. "I'm just trying to stay healthy for us," he said when I asked him why he was never home for meals anymore. He kissed my forehead, but his eyes didn't meet mine. You should try it, Sarah. Maybe join a class? You've been looking a little tired lately. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror that night, pulling at the loose skin around my waist. I was 45. I had birthed a child. I had laugh lines around my eyes and a few gray hairs I hadn't covered yet. I didn't look tired. I looked like a woman who had lived. But to him, I was starting to become invisible. The house was always clean, his clothes were always ready, but I was just part of the furniture. A comfortable old sofa that he didn't notice anymore. I tried to spice things up. I cooked his favorite fancy meals, roast lamb with rosemary, homemade pasta. I bought a new dress for his company's annual gala. A beautiful navy blue silk dress that made me feel elegant. The night of the gala, I walked down the stairs, waiting for his compliment. He looked up from his phone, glanced at me for half a second, and checked his watch. Are you ready? Ideally, we should have left 10 minutes ago. I need to introduce the new team tonight. How do I look? I asked, my voice small. Fine, he said, opening the front door. You look fine, Sarah. Let's go. Fine. That was the word that defined the end of our marriage. I was fine. The house was fine. Our life was fine. But Mark didn't want fine. He wanted fireworks. And he was about to blow up our entire world to find them. We arrived at the gala, the room buzzing with music and expensive perfume. Mark immediately let go of my arm. I see the CEO, he said, adjusting his tie. Grab yourself a drink, Sarah. I need to work the room. I watched him walk away, disappearing into the crowd of black tuxedos. I felt that familiar ache in my chest, the loneliness of being married to a man who was already gone. I wandered toward the bar, ordering a sparkling water. I turned around to scan the room for a friendly face, maybe one of the other wives. That's when I saw him. Mark was standing near the balcony doors. He wasn't talking to the CEO. He was talking to a girl. She couldn't have been more than 22. She was wearing a dress that was little more than a shimmer of gold fabric. She had long, blonde hair that cascaded down her back, and she was laughing. It wasn't a polite, corporate laugh. It was loud, free, and flirtatious. Mark was leaning in close to her. Too close. He said something, and she touched his arm. I saw a smile on my husband's face that I hadn't seen in 10 years. He looked hungry. My stomach dropped. Excuse me, a voice said beside me. It was one of Mark's colleagues, Dave. You're Sarah, right? Mark's wife? Yes, I said, forcing a smile, but my eyes kept darting back to Mark and the girl. Hi, Dave. Have you met the new intern yet? Dave asked, following my gaze. Jessica. She's brilliant. Mark has taken her under his wing. She's really shaken things up at the office. Under his wing, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Yeah. She's young, full of energy. Just what the team needed. I watched as Mark whispered something in Jessica's ear. She threw her head back and laughed again, her hand lingering on his bicep. I knew, right then and there. I didn't have proof. I didn't have text messages or hotel receipts. But I felt it in my gut, a cold, hard stone of realization. My husband wasn't just having a midlife crisis. He was replacing me. The ride home from the gala was silent. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump-thump of the windshield wipers clearing the light rain. Mark drove with one hand on the wheel, his jaw tight. He was staring straight ahead, lost in thought. Or maybe he was just replaying the night in his head, replaying her. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands clenched in my lap. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream. But 22 years of marriage had trained me to be the peacemaker, to avoid rocking the boat. Finally, I couldn't take the silence anymore. She seemed nice, I said, my voice trembling slightly. The intern. Jessica. Mark didn't look at me. He just let out a sharp, annoyed sigh. She's young, Sarah. She's eager to learn. Don't start. I'm not starting anything, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I just noticed you spent a lot of time with her tonight. You seemed happy. Mark slammed on the brakes a little too hard at the red light. He turned to me, his eyes cold. This is exactly why I don't like bringing you to these events, he snapped. I was networking. I was mentoring. But you always have to make it about you. You're so insecure, Sarah. It's exhausting. Insecure. The word felt like a slap. Was I insecure? Or was I just observant? I'm sorry, I whispered, looking out the window so he wouldn't see the tears pricking my eyes. I'm just tired. We're all tired, he muttered, turning up the radio to drown out any further conversation. Over the next 2 months, the distance between us turned into a canyon. Mark started coming home later and later. Late meeting, he would text at 7 p.m. Client dinner, he would text at 9 p.m. When he did come home, he smelled different. Not like sweat or office coffee. He smelled of vanilla and fresh rain, a cheap, sweet perfume that I didn't own. He started guarding his phone like it was the nuclear codes. He used to leave it on the kitchen counter while he showered. Now, he took it into the bathroom with him. If I walked into the room while he was typing, he would quickly flip the screen face down. Who are you talking to? I asked one evening while we were watching TV. He had been smiling at his screen for 10 minutes. He jumped, his smile vanishing instantly. Just work emails, Sarah. My God, do you ever stop checking up on me? He changed his passcode. I knew because I tried to check the time on his phone one morning while he was in the shower, and my old code, our anniversary, didn't work. I felt a knot of dread in my stomach that never went away. It was a constant nausea. I was losing him, and I was terrified. But the real blow came 3 weeks before our anniversary. I was in the home office, organizing the monthly expenses. Mark had always been careless with receipts, stuffing them into his pockets until I fished them out on laundry day. I was sorting through a pile of crumpled papers from his suit jacket when I found it. A velvet textured receipt from a high-end jewelry store downtown. My heart stopped. I smoothed out the wrinkled paper. Item, diamond tennis bracelet. Price, $4,500. Date, yesterday. I stared at the number. $4,500. Mark had been complaining about money lately, telling me we needed to cut back on groceries and turn down the heating to save on bills. But here was a receipt for a bracelet that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. A wave of hope washed over me, confusing and desperate. Our anniversary, I thought. He bought this for our anniversary. It was coming up in 3 weeks. Maybe I was wrong about everything. Maybe the late nights were him working extra hard to afford this. Maybe the secrecy was just him planning a surprise. I folded the receipt carefully and put it back in his pocket. I didn't say a word. I wanted to believe. I needed to believe that my husband still loved me. For the next 3 weeks, I held on to that receipt like a lifeline. I started taking better care of myself. I went for walks. I dyed my hair to cover the gray. I told myself that everything was going to be okay. Our 23rd anniversary arrived on a Tuesday. I spent the entire day cooking. I made his favorite steak, bought a bottle of expensive red wine, and set the table with candles. I put on the navy blue dress I had worn to the gala. I was excited. I was waiting for the moment he would pull out that small velvet box and put the bracelet on my wrist. I was ready to forgive him for the late nights and the harsh words. Mark came home at 7:30 p.m. He walked into the kitchen, loosened his tie, and looked at the table set for two. He looked confused. "What's all this?" he asked. I froze, holding the wine bottle midair. "Mark, it's the 14th. Our anniversary." He blinked. For a second, his face was blank. Then, a look of annoyance crossed his features. "Right," he said, rubbing his temples. "Right. The anniversary." I'd completely lost track of days. It's been a hell of a week at the office. My heart sank. He had forgotten. But then I remembered the receipt. He must have the gift hidden somewhere. "It's okay," I said, forcing a smile. "Sit down." I made steak. We ate in near silence. He checked his watch 3 times. When we finished, I couldn't wait anymore. I reached under the table and pulled out his gift, a new watch he had been eyeing for months. "Happy anniversary, Mark," I said softly. He opened the box, looked at the watch, and gave a tight, polite smile. "Thanks, Sarah. This is nice." He put the box on the table and didn't reach for anything else. He didn't reach into his pocket. He didn't go to his briefcase. "Do you?" I hesitated, my voice barely a whisper. "Do you have anything for me?" Mark sighed, leaning back in his chair. He looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as pity mixed with irritation. "Sarah, I told you, I forgot what day it was. I didn't have time to get anything. I'll pick up some flowers tomorrow, okay?" The room spun. "You didn't get anything?" I asked, my voice rising. "No. I'm sorry. Can we not make a drama out of this?" I stood up. My legs were shaking. I walked over to the drawer where I kept the bills. I pulled out the photo I had taken of the receipt. I hadn't kept the original, but I had the proof. I shoved the phone in his face. "Then what is this, Mark?" I demanded, the tears finally spilling over. "What is this receipt for a $4,500 diamond bracelet purchased 3 weeks ago? If it's not for me, then who is it for?" Mark looked at the photo. His face didn't crumble. He didn't look panicked. He just looked relieved. Like he was glad the secret was finally out so he didn't have to pretend anymore. He stood up slowly, wiping his mouth with the napkin. He threw the napkin onto the plate of half-eaten steak. "It's for Jessica," he said calmly. The name hung in the air like toxic smoke. "Jessica," I repeated. "The intern. The child." "She's not a child, Sarah. She's a woman. A woman who appreciates me. A woman who makes me feel alive, unlike the suffocating routine I have here with you." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "I have cooked for you, cleaned for you, and raised your daughter for 22 years, I choked out. "And you spent our savings on a bracelet for a girl who is the same age as your daughter?" Mark laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. That's exactly the problem, Sarah. You're a mother. You're a housekeeper. You're boring. Jessica is excitement. She's the future. And I realized something. He walked over to the hallway and grabbed a suitcase that I hadn't noticed was sitting by the front door. He had packed it before he even came in. I deserve to be happy, he said, looking me up and down with disdain. I'm leaving, Sarah. I'm moving in with her. I want a divorce. He didn't scream. He didn't yell. He just stated it like a business transaction. You can't do this, I whispered. We have a life. We have a home. You keep the house, he said, opening the front door. It's too big and old for me anyway. I'll send my lawyer for the rest. And just like that, he walked out into the rain. He didn't look back. He got into his red sports car, the engine roared to life, and he drove away, leaving me standing in the hallway of a 4-bedroom house that suddenly felt like a tomb. I sank to the floor, still wearing my elegant navy dress, and for the first time in my life, I screamed. The first morning after he left was the quietest moment of my life. I woke up at 6 a.m. out of habit. My body was on autopilot. I swung my legs out of bed, ready to go downstairs and make the coffee, black, 2 sugars. Then, I saw the empty space on the other side of the bed. The pillows were untouched. The closet door was open, revealing the empty hangers where his suits used to be. The reality hit me like a physical blow to the chest. He was gone. I didn't make coffee. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for 3 hours. I wanted to crawl under the covers and die. I wanted to wait for him to call and say it was a mistake. But then, my phone rang. It wasn't Mark. It was the bank. Mrs. Davis? This is fraud protection. We noticed a large transfer from your joint savings account this morning. $50,000. Was this authorized? My blood ran cold. 50,000? I whispered. That's almost everything we have in there. Yes, ma'am. The transfer was made to an account under the name Jessica Miller. Since Mr. Davis is a joint holder, he has the authorization, but the amount triggered an alert. He hadn't just left me. He had robbed me. He was funding his new life with his girlfriend using the money I had saved by clipping coupons and skipping vacations for 20 years. Something inside me snapped. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, burning rage. Thank you, I told the bank officer, my voice steady. I'll handle it. I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood up and walked to the mirror. My eyes were puffy, my hair was a mess, and I looked like a victim. No, I said to my reflection. Absolutely not. The next few months were a blur of lawyers and panic. Mark fought dirty. He claimed he earned all the money, so he deserved to spend it. He agreed to pay the bare minimum alimony, barely enough to cover the electricity bill for the big house he left me with. Sell the house, Sarah, he texted me one day. Move into a condo. Stop pretending you can afford the lifestyle I built. That text message became my motivation. I looked around my living room. I had decorated this house. I had chosen every paint color, every curtain, every piece of furniture. It was my art. Before I was a wife, I was a designer. I had talent. I had an eye for beauty. I had buried that part of myself to be Mark's shadow, but shadows can't pay mortgages. I needed a job. I printed out 50 resumes and walked into every design firm in the city. The rejections were brutal. Your portfolio is from 1998, Mrs. Davis, one hiring manager told me, looking at me over her glasses. The industry has changed. We need someone fresh. Fresh. Like Jessica. I walked out of that office into the rain, feeling defeated. I sat on a bench, watching the city traffic. I looked at my phone. I had $400 left in my checking account. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from a neighborhood social media group. Help needed. We are selling our house and need to stage it to look expensive for an open house this weekend. Our realtor says it looks too cluttered. We'll pay cash for help. I stared at the screen. I knew how to make a home look beautiful. I had been doing it for free for 22 years. I typed a reply. I can be there in 20 minutes. I went to that stranger's house. It was a mess, toys everywhere, mismatched furniture, bad lighting. I spent 6 hours there. I rearranged the sofas to open up the room. I decluttered the shelves. I used items they already had to create a warm, inviting atmosphere. I went into their garden, cut some fresh flowers, and placed them in the entryway. When the owners came home, their jaws dropped. Is this our house? The wife asked, looking around in shock. It looks like a magazine, the husband said. They paid me $500 cash. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't eat dinner alone in the dark. I ordered a pizza, poured a glass of wine, and sat on my floor with a notebook. I wrote 3 words at the top of the page, new chapter interiors. I didn't become a millionaire overnight. It was hard work. Harder than I had ever worked for Mark. I started small. I staged houses for local realtors. I painted walls myself because I couldn't afford contractors. I scoured thrift stores for furniture, sanded it down, and refinished it until it looked like a designer piece. My hands, once perfectly manicured for Mark, were now covered in paint and calluses. And I loved them. Word of mouth spread. There's this woman, Sarah. She's a miracle worker. She can turn a shack into a palace. 6 months turned into a year. 1 year turned into 2. I hired my first assistant, Clara. I rented a small office space downtown. I stopped dyeing my hair to hide the gray and instead embraced it, getting a chic, silver bob cut that made me look sharp and professional. I bought new suits, tailored, expensive, powerful. I wasn't Mark's wife anymore. I was Sarah Davis, owner of the city's most sought-after boutique staging firm. And while I was rising, I started hearing whispers about Mark. My daughter, Sophie, would come home from university for holidays and fill me in, though she tried to be gentle. Dad looks tired, Mom, she said one Thanksgiving, stirring the gravy in my new, renovated kitchen. Oh? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Is he? Yeah. Jessica, she likes to spend money. A lot of it. Dad bought her a new convertible. They went to the Maldives twice this year. But he's always stressed. He asked me if I could skip a semester of college to save tuition. My knife froze on the cutting board. He did what? He asked if I could take a gap year. He said cash flow is a bit tight right now. I turned to my daughter. You stay in school, Sophie. I will pay your tuition. Every cent. Do not worry about money. But Mom, it's expensive. I can afford it, I said, and the realization hit me. I could afford it. I didn't need him. That was the moment I truly let him go. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just free. Or so I thought. 3 years passed. My business was booming. I had just landed a contract to redesign the lobby of a major hotel chain. I was on top of the world. Then came that rainy Tuesday. I was sitting in my office, looking out at the skyline, when Clara buzzed the intercom. "Ms. Davis? There is a Mr. Mark here to see you." And now, here we are. Back in the present moment. I watched him through the glass. He was wringing his hands, looking at the floor. The arrogance was gone. The red sports car was probably gone too. I smoothed my skirt, took a deep breath, and pressed the intercom button. "Send him in, Clara." The door opened. Mark walked in. He smelled like wet wool and stale cigarettes. He looked around my office, the modern art on the walls, the leather chairs, the view of the city, and his eyes widened. He looked at me. Really looked at me. He didn't see the housewife in the apron anymore. He saw a CEO. "Hello, Mark," I said, not standing up. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" He sat down heavily. He tried to smile, that same charming smile he used to use to get his way, but it faltered. "Sarah," he said, his voice raspy. "You look incredible." "Really? Being single suits you." "I'm not just single, Mark," I corrected him coolly. "I'm successful. But I doubt you came here to compliment my haircut." "What do you want?" He sighed, rubbing his face. He looked 10 years older than his age. "It's Jessica," he said, the name sounding like a curse now. "And, well, it's the business. The market has been tough. I made some bad investments." He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. "She's pregnant, Sarah. And I'm broke. I'm completely underwater. The bank is going to take the condo. I have nowhere to go." I stared at him. The man who told me I was boring. The man who stole $50,000 from our savings. The man who left me on our anniversary. He was asking me for help. "I need a loan," he whispered, the shame finally coloring his cheeks red. "Just until I get back on my feet. I know I was hard on you. But we were family for 20 years. You're the only one who can help me." I looked at him. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and suffocating. I listened to the rain hitting the window. Then, I leaned back in my chair and did the one thing he didn't expect. I smiled. The smile stayed on my face, but it wasn't out of joy. It was the smile of a person who had finally reached the end of a very long, very dark tunnel. "Alone, Mark?" I asked. My voice was calm, almost conversational. "How much are we talking about?" Mark swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He looked at my desk, at the expensive fountain pen, the high-end computer, the leather-bound planner. He thought he saw an opening. He thought he saw the old Sarah, the one who used to fix all his problems. 50,000, he whispered. "Just 50. It would clear my immediate debts and give me, a cushion to find a new place before the baby comes." 50,000. The exact amount he had drained from our joint account the day he left. "That's a very specific number," I said. "Sarah, please," he said, his voice cracking. "Jessica, she doesn't understand. She's young. She thought I was richer than I was. When the money started running low, she didn't stop spending. She has all these expectations, and I'm drowning. I'm 60 years old soon, and I'm starting over with a newborn and zero in the bank. I'm terrified." I stood up slowly and walked over to the window. I looked out at the street below. People were rushing through the rain, umbrellas up, heads down. "You know, Mark," I said, my back to him. "When you left, I didn't have 50,000. I had $400 in my checking account. I had a house I couldn't afford to heat. And I had a daughter whose father told her she might have to drop out of college because he was too busy buying diamond bracelets for an intern. I was in a bad place," he stammered behind me. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, I turned around, my eyes locking onto his. "You were thinking very clearly. You were thinking about yourself. You told me I was boring. You told me I was just a housekeeper. You told me you deserved to be happy, as if my happiness, or Sophie's, didn't matter at all." Mark stood up, taking a step toward me. He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "I made a mistake, Sarah. Okay? I see that now. She's not you. She doesn't care about the home. She doesn't care about me. She cares about the car and the trips. I miss what we had. I miss our life." "You don't miss our life, Mark," I said firmly. "You miss the person who did everything for you so you didn't have to grow up. You miss the person you could step on without her ever pushing back." I walked back to my desk and opened the top drawer. I pulled out a checkbook. Mark's eyes lit up. He actually leaned forward, a spark of greedy hope in his expression. He thought he had one. He thought the guilt trip had worked. I took the pen and wrote a number on the check. I ripped it out and held it out to him. Mark grabbed it, but as he looked at the paper, his face fell. This is for $100, he said, confused. "That's for your cab ride home," I said. "And maybe a nice dinner for Jessica. Consider it a gift for the baby. But as for the 50,000? I already gave that to you 3 years ago. You took it from our savings. You spent it. That was your loan, Mark. And I'm calling it settled." "Sarah, you can't be serious," he pleaded. "You're successful now. You have the money. This is nothing to you." "It's not about the money," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, hard whisper. "It's about the fact that I don't owe you anything. Not a penny. Not a minute of my time. Not a single thought. You chose your path. You chose the excitement over the routine. Now, you have to live with it." I leaned over and pressed the intercom. "Clara? Mr. Mark is leaving now. Please show him to the elevator." Mark stood there for a moment, the $100 check trembling in his hand. He looked like he wanted to scream, to break something, to yell at me for being cold. But he looked at my face, at the strength and the absolute lack of pity, and he realized he had no power here. He was a stranger in my world. He turned without another word and walked out. He didn't look back. A few weeks later, the news hit the local business circles. Mark's firm had let him go. Apparently, his distractions and financial instability had become a liability. He had filed for personal bankruptcy. I heard from a mutual friend that Jessica had moved back in with her parents, taking the baby and the few designer bags she had left. Mark was living in a studio apartment above a noisy garage, working as a junior consultant for a firm half the size of his old one. The glow-up wasn't just about my business or my bank account. It was about the way people looked at me now. At the annual Chamber of Commerce Gala, the same event where my heart had been broken years before, I was the keynote speaker. I stood on that stage in a tailored silver gown. I looked out at the crowd of hundreds. I saw some of the men who had refused to hire me 3 years ago. I saw the wives who had once whispered about poor Sarah behind my back. I didn't talk about betrayal. I didn't talk about Mark. I talked about resilience. I talked about finding your voice when everyone else tells you to be quiet. I talked about the fact that a woman's worth isn't measured by the man on her arm, but by the fire in her soul. When I finished, the room stood up. The applause was deafening. As I walked off the stage, I saw Dave, Mark's old colleague, waiting by the stairs. "Incredible speech, Sarah," he said, looking genuinely impressed. "I saw Mark last week. He's seen better days. He told me he regretted leaving you every single day." I smiled at Dave, a genuine, peaceful smile. "Tell him thanks," I said. "But tell him not to waste his time. I stopped thinking about him a long time ago." That evening, I went home to my house. My house. I had paid off the mortgage a year early. I had changed the locks, the paint, and the memories. Sophie was there, sitting on the back porch with 2 mugs of tea. She was graduating next month with honors. She had a job offer at a top architectural firm. I sat down beside her, the cool evening air smelling of damp earth and blooming jasmine. "Are you okay, Mom?" she asked softly. "I heard he came to the office." "I'm better than okay, honey," I said, taking a sip of my tea. It was perfect. I realized something today. I spent 22 years trying to make someone else's life beautiful. I thought that was my purpose. And now? Now I realize that the most beautiful thing I ever built was myself. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars come out over the suburbs. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who ironed shirts and waited for a compliment that never came. I felt a wave of love for her. She had been strong enough to endure the pain, and smart enough to use it as fuel. I didn't hate Mark. I didn't even wish him ill. Hate is a heavy burden, and I had worked too hard to feel light. He was just a lesson. A painful, expensive, necessary lesson. I looked at my hands in the moonlight. They were the hands of a builder. A creator. A survivor. Life doesn't end at 40 or 50 or whenever someone decides you are finished. It ends when you stop believing you can reinvent yourself. I had lost a husband, but I had found my life. And that was a trade I would make every single time. I look back at that night of our anniversary, and I remember the sound of the rain and the feeling of the world falling apart. If you're going through that right now, I want you to know one thing. The ending of your current story is just the prologue to the one you're meant to write. Don't let someone else's midlife crisis become your identity. You are more than a wife, more than a mother, more than a shadow. You are the architect of your own future. Mark thought he was leaving me for something better. He didn't realize that I was the best thing he ever had. But the most important thing is, I finally realized it too. I'm Sarah Davis. And for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Sometimes, the hardest part of being a strong woman is realizing that you've been using your strength to carry someone who didn't deserve the effort. I spent years thinking that my loyalty was my greatest virtue. I thought that by making Mark's life perfect, I was ensuring our happiness. But you can't pour from an empty cup, and you certainly can't build a future with someone who is looking for an exit. When he came to my office asking for that loan, I didn't feel the urge to scream or the need for revenge. I just felt a profound sense of peace. I realized that his opinion of me, whether he thought I was boring then or incredible now, didn't actually matter. What mattered was that I finally liked the woman I saw in the mirror. Success isn't always about the money in the bank or the title on the door. True success is the moment you stop seeking validation from people who didn't know how to value you when you were at your lowest. To anyone out there who feels like they've been replaced, or like their best years are behind them because of someone else's choice, please, don't believe the lie. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. I closed my office door that day and went back to work, not because I had to, but because I loved the life I had built with my own two hands. I have to ask you, if you were in my position, sitting across from the person who broke your heart and your bank account, would you have given him the $100? Or would you have closed the door without a word? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If this story reminded you of your own strength, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue to share stories of resilience and hope. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late for your own glow up.